Elias Grant had lived on the edge of the desert plains for most of his life, and he liked it that way. He was the kind of man who preferred quiet mornings, steady work, and long rides across the dry land. His ranch was not big or famous, but it was his peace. Every morning, he followed the same routine: check the horses, look at the fences, and make sure none of his cattle had wandered too far during the night. Routine kept his mind clear, and the calm of the land kept his heart steady. That morning, however, something felt different the moment he stepped outside. The air was still in a strange way, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Even the horses seemed uneasy. Elias noticed his mare lifting her head again and again, turning toward the old trail near the edge of his land. "Easy, girl," he murmured, patting her neck. But he felt the same tension she felt. Something was out there, something unusual. Elias saddled her quickly. He didn't like ignoring strange signs. Out here, anything unexpected could turn into a problem if a man didn't look into it. So he rode toward the old cottonwood trees, following the faint path that had once been used by travelers long before a ranch existed here. The sun had only begun to rise, washing everything in soft gold. As he reached the first bend in the trail, he stopped. Up ahead, something was hanging from one of the trees. At first, he thought it was just an abandoned piece of cloth or maybe a tool left behind by another rancher. But as he rode closer, his breath tightened. It was not an object, it was a man. Elias's heart dropped. He urged his horse forward quickly but carefully. He didn't know if the man was alive or gone, but he needed to check. When he got close enough, he saw the truth. The man was still breathing, faint but steady. He was tied in a way that left him hanging awkwardly, clearly left by someone who wanted to hurt him or abandon him. But there was no sign of struggle now. The man was unconscious, weak, but alive. Elias felt a jolt of shock, but he forced himself to stay calm. In the desert, panic helped no one. "Hold on," Elias said softly, even though the man couldn't hear him. "I've got you." He dismounted quickly and began loosening the ropes. He worked slowly, carefully, making sure not to cause the man any more pain. When the final knot came loose, Elias caught the man before he could fall to the ground. The stranger was older, with long dark hair and the strong features of an Apache elder. His clothes were worn, his skin dry from the sun, and he looked like he had been in that condition for many hours. Elias lifted him gently and carried him to the horse. The mare stayed still, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Elias placed the man across the saddle in the safest way he could manage, then mounted behind him. He held the reins in one hand, and the man with the other, riding slowly back toward the ranch. All the way home, Elias kept glancing around. He didn't know who had left the man there or if they would come back, but he didn't see anyone. The trail was empty, the land wide and silent. When he reached his ranch, Elias carried the man inside his small cabin. He laid him on a clean bed, removed the ropes, and began giving him small sips of water. The man's eyelids twitched, but he didn't wake. Elias took a cool cloth and placed it on the man's forehead. He worked quietly, carefully. Well, he had no medical training, but he knew how to take care of someone in trouble. Out here, everyone learned basic care. Life depended on it. Hours passed. The stranger remained still, but his breathing grew stronger. Elias stayed nearby, checking on him again and again. He didn't leave to work the fields. He didn't go outside to finish his morning chores. His attention stayed fixed on the man who had been left to die on a lonely trail. By late afternoon, the stranger finally opened his eyes. It wasn't a full awakening. His eyes moved slowly, as if remembering how to see the world. He looked around, the small cabin, then at Elias, who was sitting in a chair beside the bed. "You're safe," Elias said gently. "You're in my home. Found you near the trail." The stranger didn't speak at first. He tried, but no sound came. Elias brought water again, lifting the old man slightly and helping him drink. The man swallowed with difficulty, but seemed grateful. For a long moment, he stared at Elias with an expression that was hard to read. Part confusion, part caution, part something deeper, maybe even respect. Then he closed his eyes again, too tired to stay awake. Elias didn't pressure him with questions. He simply let him rest. As night fell, The ranch grew quiet, and the only sound was the old man's steady breathing. Elias sat beside him through most of the night, listening for any sign of trouble outside. The desert wind brushed against the windows, and the horses shifted restlessly in the barn. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger was important, that something bigger was happening near midnight. The man stirred again and whispered something so faint Elias almost didn't hear it. "Why, help me." The voice was soft, but weighted with meaning. Elias leaned forward, because no one should be left alone like that. Not out there, not anywhere. The man studied him again, his eyes clearer now. He seemed to see something in Elias, something honest and steady. After a moment, he nodded slightly, as if accepting the truth in Elias's words. Elias wanted to ask his name, wanted to know what had happened, but the man was already drifting back to sleep. The next morning, the sun rose silently, painting the desert in soft reds and oranges. Elias stepped outside for a moment to check on his animals. The calm of the land made him feel safe again. But when he looked toward the horizon, he noticed something unusual, a faint line of dust rising far away, like a disturbance in the still air. He narrowed his eyes. It wasn't caused by cattle. It wasn't caused by wagons either. It looked too wide and too thick. Something or many somethings were moving across the land. Elias felt a strange chill run through him. He went back inside and checked on the old man. The elder was awake now, resting with more strength than the day before. When Elias stepped closer, the man looked straight at him. His voice was soft but clear this time. "You saved me," the elder said, "but you do not know who I am." Elias didn't answer. He didn't want to pressure the man. The elder continued, "My people will come." His tone wasn't threatening. It wasn't frightening. It was simply the truth, calm and certain. He was telling Elias something important, something that carried weight. Elias swallowed. "Your people?" The elder nodded slowly. His expression was solemn but thankful. "They will come. For me?" Elias understood then that the rising dust on the horizon was not a simple movement of animals. It was something else, something much larger. But he didn't panic. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat beside the elder again. "Whoever comes," Elias said quietly, "you'll be ready to meet them." The elder closed his eyes, resting again, but a small, peaceful expression appeared on his face. He seemed comforted by Elias's words. All morning, Elias kept checking outside. The dust cloud grew larger. It moved slowly but steadily, coming closer with each passing hour. He didn't know how many people were out there. He didn't know if they were angry, grateful, or simply searching. But he knew they were coming for the man he had saved. And he also knew one thing for certain. He would not hide. He would not regret what he had done. Helping someone in trouble was the kind of decision a man should never feel afraid of. As the sun reached the highest point in the sky, Elias stood at the edge of his porch, staring at the horizon. The dust cloud now looked like a wall moving toward him. Shapes began to appear, figures on horseback, many of them, stretching far across the land. The elder's words echoed again. "My people will come." Elias took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he would face it calmly. He had done what was right, and he believed the truth had its own power. Inside the cabin, the old man opened his eyes once more and whispered something only the quiet air could hear. "Tomorrow begins a very different day." Elias Grant stood at the edge of his porch, watching the long line of dust rise higher over the horizon. The morning sun had turned bright, shining across the plains in a way that made distances difficult to judge. But even with the shimmering air, Elias could tell the moving shapes were many, far more than any cattle herd or small group of riders. The figures stretched wide. It's almost like a dark river flowing slowly across open land. Inside the cabin, the Apache elder rested quietly, his eyes closed but his breathing steady. The man had gained a little strength overnight, but not enough to stand or walk. Elias checked on him several times, making sure he had water and a blanket. Each time the elder saw him, he looked at Elias with steady eyes. It's full of meaning. "You helped me," the elder had said earlier. "Now my people come." Those words stayed in Elias's mind as he stood outside. He didn't feel afraid, but he felt the weight of responsibility. Out here in the desert, Misunderstandings could lead to trouble between groups. But he hoped that truth and honesty would guide whatever happened next. By mid-morning, the approaching riders were close enough for Elias to see them clearly: Apache warriors. Hundreds at first glance, and then more behind them. Their horses moved with quiet discipline, and the warriors rode with dignity. Some were younger, some older, but all carried themselves with a proud posture. Their presence filled the land like a moving sea of determination. Elias didn't step back. He stayed where he was, his calm body language showing that he had nothing to hide. His mare stood nearby, also watching the riders, but she stayed still. Sensing Elias's quiet control, the first wave of riders stopped about 50 yards from the porch. Several leaders rode forward, forming a line in front of Elias. None drew weapons. None shouted. Their approach was silent, and their faces were serious, but not hostile. One of them, a tall man with sharp features and strong, steady eyes, rode even closer. He stopped only a few yards away. His horse stood proudly, its mane brushing lightly against the wind. The tall man looked at Elias without blinking. "You found an elder," the man said calmly. "Where is he?" Elias nodded once and pointed toward the cabin. "Inside, resting." The tall man took a slow breath, studying Elias carefully. "How did you find him?" "By chance," Elias replied. "I was riding the trail early this morning. I saw him hanging there. He was still alive, so I brought him home." He paused, making sure each word was simple and honest. "I couldn't leave a man like that." The tall man didn't respond right away. He seemed to be thinking deeply, measuring Elias's tone, searching for any sign of deception. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried respect rather than suspicion. "You helped him," he said. "You acted with courage." Elias didn't claim anything. He simply nodded. The tall man turned his head slightly and lifted his hand in a small signal. Dozens more riders approached, stopping behind him. One of them dismounted immediately and rushed toward the cabin. But he paused outside the door, waiting for Elias to allow him inside. Elias pushed the door open and stepped aside. "Go ahead," he said softly. The young warrior entered. Elias stayed outside with the leaders, keeping his posture steady. A few moments later, a sound rose from inside the cabin, a quiet voice calling out in their language. The Apache leaders outside straightened, listening closely. The tall man stepped forward. "That is the voice of our chief," he said. "My father." Elias looked at him, surprised. The elder was indeed someone important, someone whose well-being affected not just one person, but an entire community. The tall man noticed Elias's reaction and explained calmly. "My father leads our people. When he disappeared, we feared the worst." His voice tightened slightly, though he remained composed. "We searched 2 days and nights for him. We did not know if he was still living." Elias felt the weight of the situation settle deeper on his shoulders. "He is alive," he said gently. "Weak, but living. I did what I could." The tall man's eyes softened, gratitude shining through quietly. "That is more than most would do." More riders gathered, forming a half-circle around the ranch. Though their numbers were great, their movement remained calm. No one acted in a threatening way. They stayed in respectful formation, waiting for news from inside the cabin. Soon, the young warrior who entered earlier came out, bringing a message. He spoke to the tall man in their language, and though Elias could not understand the words, he could read the emotion: relief, surprise, respect. The tall man stepped onto the porch and spoke to Elias again. "My father says you saved his life," he said. "He wishes to see you." Elias followed the tall man inside. The cabin was small, but the air inside felt warm and peaceful. The elder lay on the bed, propped up slightly by blankets. His eyes were open, and he looked stronger than before. When Elias stood beside him, the elder gave a slow nod of recognition. "This man," the elder said, pointing a tired finger at Elias, "cut the ropes, gave water, stayed by my side." His voice was weak, but steady. He did not turn away. The tall man bowed his head slightly, showing deep respect for his father's words. Elias felt humbled. He didn't know what to say. Helping someone was simply part of who he was, not something he expected praise for. The elder continued, speaking with more determination. My son, remember this ranch. Remember this man. He paused to breathe. He is not our enemy. The tall man placed a hand over his heart, acknowledging the request. When Elias stepped out of the cabin again, he saw something change among the warriors outside. The moment they saw the tall man return with a calm expression, they relaxed their horses. Some exhaled deeply. Some lowered their heads in silent relief. They had found their chief alive, and that truth brought peace to their hearts. More warriors dismounted. Some gathered near the cabin. Others moved around the ranch, observing respectfully, but not entering any buildings. Their presence was great, but their behavior was disciplined and graceful. Elias watched quietly. He had never seen such a large movement of people, yet everything was so organized it felt like a ceremony rather than a confrontation. The tall man approached him again. My name is Taza, he said. I am the chief's son. I lead our warriors in his absence. He paused before adding, I want to thank you. You don't owe me anything, Elias replied. I only helped someone in need. Taza's expression did not change, but his eyes reflected deep appreciation. In our world, he said, helping an elder is not a small thing. It is a great act. One of the older Apache warriors stepped forward and addressed Taza, speaking quietly but firmly. Taza listened, then turned to Elias. They ask if you saw the men who mistreated my father, Taza said. Elias shook his head. No one was there when I found him. Only the dust and the rope. Taza nodded, understanding. Whoever did this will answer to the truth. But today, we care only about my father's safety. The rest of the day moved slowly. The warriors set up a large temporary camp around Elias's ranch, but they remained respectful of his space. They made a circle far enough away from his animals and fields, careful not to disturb his work. Elias brought out buckets of water and offered them freely. Many warriors accepted with quiet gratitude. A few elders approached him to express thanks, though many didn't speak English. Their gestures spoke louder than words, soft nods, gentle looks, hands placed over their hearts. As the sun lowered, the colors of the land shifted to warm orange and deep gold. Elias stood at the edge of his porch, watching fires ignite across the temporary camp. The glow created a peaceful sight, like stars settling on the earth. Inside the cabin, the chief rested but asked to speak with Elias for a moment. Sit, the elder said gently. Elias sat beside him. You did not know who I was, the elder said. Yet you helped me. Elias shook his head. A man didn't need to know your name to know you needed help. The elder smiled faintly. That is why you are different. Elias didn't reply. He didn't know how to respond to kindness from a man. It saved only by following his own sense of right. The elder's voice softened. Tomorrow, you will see how much your kindness means to my people. They will not forget. Night settled, and the fires outside burned in quiet circles of warmth. Though thousands of warriors surrounded the ranch, Elias felt safe. He sensed respect, not danger. He sensed gratitude, not suspicion. Just before sleep, Elias stepped outside once more. He saw Taza standing among his people, speaking softly, giving directions. Caring for the community now reunited with their chief, Taza looked up and met Elias's eyes across the distance. He gave a small, respectful nod. Elias returned the gesture. A single thought crossed his mind as he returned. Inside, this land would remember this day. And so would he. The sun rose slowly over the desert the next morning, painting the sky with soft layers of pink, orange, and gold. Elias Grant woke before the first light touched his cabin roof. He stepped outside quietly and looked across the plains. The Apache camp, spread out in perfect formation around his ranch, was calm and organized. Small cooking fires were already lit. Some riders were tending to their horses while others sat in quiet groups. Speaking in low voices or preparing the morning meal, Elias stood still for a moment, absorbing the sight. The desert had never looked so alive. Yet everything was peaceful. There was no shouting, no loud movements, no signs of danger. Despite the thousands of warriors camped near his home, Elias felt a strange sense of harmony. The land, once silent and empty, now carried the quiet rhythm of community. Inside the cabin, the Apache chief slept soundly. His breathing was stronger. His color was returning. Elias checked on him every few minutes, making sure he was comfortable. Each time the chief woke, he looked at Elias with the same calm, deep respect, as if he fully understood the man who had saved his life. When the morning brightened, a gentle knock sounded on Elias's door. He opened it to find Taza, the chief's son, standing with two elders. Taza's expression was serious but warm. "My father wishes to speak with you outside," Taza said. Elias nodded and let them come in. They helped the chief sit up carefully and guided him to his feet. Though the elder was weak, he insisted on walking with dignity. With slow steps and the support of his people, he moved toward the porch. Elias followed close behind, ready to help if needed. When the chief stepped outside, a quiet wave passed through the camp. Warriors turned their heads. Elders stood up. Younger members straightened with respect. Even the horses seemed to sense the significance of this moment. The chief raised his hand, and a hush fell over the entire camp. He looked at Elias first. His expression filled with gratitude. "This man," the chief said in a strong but gentle voice, "brought me back from the edge of death. He used no reward, no promise, no fear. He acted with kindness alone." Elias felt his cheeks warm, but he stood steady. The chief continued. "Such a man deserves respect not only from me, but from all our people." Taza then stepped forward and spoke clearly so all could hear. "My father declares that this ranch, this land, and this man will be under our protection," Taza said. "Whoever tries to harm him or take what is his will answer to us." A deep murmur of agreement moved through the warriors. It was not a shout, but a strong, unified sound of support like wind passing through 1,000 trees. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. He had never asked for protection. He had never imagined such a thing. But he understood the importance of the chief's words. Out here, where bad men sometimes roamed and trouble could come without warning, having the trust of an entire nation was no small thing. The chief reached into a small pouch carried by an elder beside him. From it, he removed a handcrafted symbol, a circular token made of wood and stone, decorated with patterns representing unity and respect. He held it out to Elias. "This is a sign of alliance," the chief said. "Only a few men beyond our people carry such a symbol. It means that you are a friend, a brother in spirit." Elias accepted it with both hands, treating it with the same care he would give a newborn foal. He did not speak right away. He simply bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the honor. For a long moment, the entire camp stood in respectful silence. Then the chief turned to Taza. "My son," he said softly, "tell our people what will happen next." Taza lifted his voice. "Our chief will return home in peace," he announced. "We will travel slowly, giving him time to recover. Before we leave, we will help this rancher with anything he needs." Elias blinked in surprise. "You don't have to do that," he said. Taza smiled slightly. "Kindness must be answered with kindness," he replied. "This is our way." The warriors dispersed respectfully, beginning preparations to pack their camp. Others stayed behind to check Elias's fences, help repair his barn door, and gather fresh water. A few elders visited the cabin one more time to make sure. The chief had everything he needed for the journey. Throughout the day, Elias found himself surrounded by warm faces and gentle gestures. Though they came from a different culture, their intentions were clear and sincere. He offered water and food whenever he could, though he knew they had plenty of their own supplies. As the sun climbed high, the chief rested again inside the cabin, while Taza stood on the porch with Elias. They spoke quietly, sharing small stories about their family's land and the way life moved across the desert. "You live alone?" Taza asked. Elias nodded. "Most of the time, you have a strong heart," Taza said. "But no man should carry everything alone." Elias didn't reply. He didn't want to talk about loneliness. But Taza saw more than Elias said. "You helped our chief because you understand the value of life," Taza continued. "That is something rare. The two men stood together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Apache people prepare for their journey. By mid-afternoon, the camp was ready. Warriors lined up in long rows. Horses stood tall and steady. The land, quiet in the morning, now hummed softly with the power of thousands preparing to move as one. The chief was helped outside once more, this time mounted gently onto a strong, calm horse. He held onto the reins with dignity. Even though his strength was still returning before he left, called out to Elias. "Elias Grant," he said, "you gave life back to me. My people remember such things. We will watch this land. If trouble ever comes, send a sign. We will answer." Elias placed his hand over the token the chief had given him. "I'll treat this with honor," he said quietly. The chief nodded, satisfied. Then, with a low command from Taza, the Apache riders began moving forward. It was one of the most incredible sights Elias had ever seen. Thousands of warriors rode in long columns stretching across the plains. Their movement was graceful, disciplined, almost like a great river flowing. Some turned their heads as they passed Elias, giving him small nods, respectful looks, or gentle gestures of thanks. No words were needed. The message was clear. When the final group rode past, Elias stood alone on his porch, watching the immense formation move farther and farther away. As the distance grew, the dust gradually settled. Leaving the land quiet once again, the ranch returned to stillness. But it did not feel empty. Elias stepped inside the cabin and looked at the token in his hand. It felt warm, solid, and meaningful. He placed it carefully on a shelf near the window where the sunlight could touch it. He knew life would not be the same as before. He knew the land around him now held a different story, one that tied his simple ranch to the hearts of thousands. Word spread in nearby towns within weeks. People whispered about how Elias Grant had somehow survived in a region known to be full of tension. Some said he had magic on his side. Others said he had made a secret agreement. But Elias never explained the details. He didn't brag. He didn't tell dramatic stories. He simply returned to his routine, feeding horses, fixing fences, watching the sunrise over the mountains. But he carried something new inside him. Quiet strength. A deep peace, and a sense of connection to people who valued honor the same way he did. Every now and then, he would find signs near the edges of his land footprints, small gifts like carved stones or feathers, or markings on rocks that indicated watchful eyes had passed through. These were not warnings. They were reminders. Friendly signals from those who now guarded him in silence. On windy nights, when the fire crackled in his cabin and the land felt wide and ancient, Elias would think about the day he found the chief hanging from that cottonwood tree. A single moment had changed everything. A simple act had linked him to a nation, and he understood then that kindness was not just a small decision. It was a bridge between worlds. Years later, when people told stories of Elias Grant, they always mentioned one thing. He was the quiet rancher who gained the respect of thousands simply by doing what was right. And the Apache people, true to their promise, never forgot the man who saved their chief.